Long before they realized it, Han Li had already chosen who would live and who would not. If you enjoy my way of explaining and storytelling, don't forget to like and subscribe. It really motivates me to keep creating. Han Li followed the direction Chen Jing had indicated and soon noticed a cluster of buildings that stood apart from the rest. Each structure towered above its surroundings, grand and imposing. Even the smallest pavilions rose 2 or 3 stories high, while the largest reached 4 or 5 levels into the sky. Streams of cultivators flowed steadily in and out of their entrances, lending the area a vibrancy and bustle unmatched anywhere else in the city. Han Li gave a faint nod. Yet to the surprise of the 3 cultivators, he said calmly, "There's no need for introductions. I'll go take a look myself. You may leave." "Yes." Chen Jing was momentarily taken aback, but he dared not object and immediately bowed with utmost respect. Just as Han Li turned away, his voice rang out again, this time cold and edged with warning. "I don't want anyone to know that I've come to this island. You understand what that means, don't you?" Chen Jing's heart jolted, but his expression remained carefully composed. "Please rest assured, Senior. We won't speak a word of this to anyone." "Haha, I certainly hope so." Han Li chuckled softly. Yet within his sleeve, his finger flicked almost imperceptibly. In the next instant, his figure wavered and vanished in a flash of azure light. The 3 cultivators' expressions changed drastically. They hurriedly scanned their surroundings, only to find that Han Li had disappeared without a trace. "Marshal Uncle Chen, not a word. We return immediately." Chen Jing cut her off sharply, his face darkened. With a wave of his hand, he led the other 2 as his body transformed into a streak of light shooting out of the city. The 2 Foundation establishment cultivators, still shaken, could only follow in silence. They flew more than 50 kilometers before they realized it, finally descending upon an unremarkable mountain. Hidden at the foot of the mountain, in an inconspicuous corner, lay a small cave abode. Chen Jing led them inside and promptly activated all of its protective restrictions. Only then did he sit down in the main hall, closing his eyes to meditate. The 2 younger cultivators exchanged uneasy glances, but neither dared to speak. After a long while, Chen Jing finally opened his eyes and exhaled slowly, the tension in his expression easing just a fraction. "I can confirm now his spiritual sense isn't watching us here. Even if it could reach this far, it wouldn't be able to penetrate the cave's restrictions." "Marshal Nisyan, what was it you wanted to say?" he asked, turning toward the young woman. She hesitated briefly before replying, I feel that Senior Han's origins are rather suspicious. He's a nascent soul cultivator, yet we've never heard of him before." "That's quite strange. Should we report this to the sect and have them investigate? Perhaps our patriarch might recognize him." The elderly man nodded in agreement. Chen Jing, however, let out a cold snort. "And what if we do learn who he is? Our patriarch is currently in seclusion, attempting to break through to the late nascent soul stage. No matter who this man is, he's not worth disturbing that. And if even our patriarch cannot deal with him, why would we risk provoking him just to satisfy our curiosity?" His tone grew sharper as he continued. "From what he said, he seems familiar with the scattered star seas. Most likely he's only just emerged from a long period of seclusion, hardly unusual here. He warned us not to reveal his presence. Do you think he would hesitate to kill us simply because we belong to the Azure Yang sect? Without our patriarch, the sect would be powerless to avenge us. Why take such a risk for no gain?" A chill ran down the young woman's spine. She quickly nodded in agreement. And besides, Chen Jing continued, growing increasingly impassioned, "Even if we told someone, it wouldn't benefit us in the slightest." Instead, he failed to notice the faint shimmer of golden light beneath his shoe. The light flickered once, then silently slipped free from the soul, sinking soundlessly into the stone floor. Moments later, it traveled deep underground until it was abruptly halted by an azure barrier of light. This was the cave's protective restriction. The golden light wavered, then receded, revealing a thumb-sized golden beetle. It was one of Han Li's gold-devouring beetles. The moment it resumed its true form, the beetle lunged at the barrier and began to gnaw at it, with startling ferocity. The restriction was crude, far from high grade. Within moments, the beetle had chewed through it and slipped to the other side. Not once did the restriction react. Chen Jing and the others remained completely unaware. The beetle flashed again and vanished deeper underground. A short while later, on a street in the southern part of the city, a tall, gaunt old man paused mid-step. A glimmer of golden light shot up from the ground and slipped silently into his sleeve. His expression did not change, but the corners of his lips curved upward ever so slightly. This man was none other than Han Li, his appearance subtly altered. The golden glimmer was, of course, the gold devouring beetle within which he had embedded a sliver of his spiritual sense. Now that he had reached the late nascent soul stage, although his spiritual sense still paled in comparison to that of a deity transformation cultivator, it far surpassed that of ordinary late nascent soul cultivators. This allowed him to infuse a wisp of his consciousness into an object, though only temporarily, and only within a living, sentient host. Fortunately, the gold-devouring beetles were spirit insects, bound to his soul, enabling him to control them directly. When he had parted ways with the three cultivators, he had chosen not to kill them outright. Instead, he had imbued a sliver of his spiritual sense into one of the beetles and secretly planted it on Chen Jing, allowing it to follow him back to his cave abode. Given Han Li's current cultivation and the beetle's unique abilities, it was naturally impossible for a mere early core formation cultivator to detect it. Han Li had already made his decision. If they obeyed him, he would let them live. But if they dared to act behind his back, the beetle would become their executioner. Though immature gold-devouring beetles posed little threat to nascent soul cultivators, their indestructibility and devouring abilities made short work of an early core formation cultivator and two at the foundation establishment stage. As the beetle returned, Han Li withdrew that sliver of spiritual sense. Instantly, the entire conversation of Chen Jing's group replayed itself within his mind. A faint smile flickered across his face. He dismissed them from his thoughts. His attention shifted instead to the pavilions lining the street. He had clearly entered the marketplace. Cultivators filled the area, some soaring into the air, others descending from above. There were also those who moved with guarded caution, hurrying through the pavilions as though constantly wary of being recognized. Han Li, by contrast, observed others openly and without restraint. Naturally, this drew attention, but once his cultivation base was sensed, those who noticed him reacted with immediate alarm. Some hurried away, while others forced polite smiles before retreating. Though Han Li had suppressed his aura to that of a late core formation cultivator, it was already more than enough to intimidate everyone around him. After taking a few more steps, he suddenly slowed. His gaze fell upon a row of pavilions, and a trace of surprise appeared in his eyes. 6 two-story buildings stood side by side along the street. Before each one fluttered a long, narrow banner, each marked with a distinct emblem: a blue beast, a golden sword, an azure herb, and others. "Are those the 6 united palaces?" Han Li murmured in surprise. If he remembered correctly, most factions in the scattered star seas had already joined the Starfall coalition. It was unexpected, almost bold for another force to establish such a visible presence here. It seemed the Starfall coalition's influence was indeed formidable. While they couldn't fully dominate Green Spirit Island, other powers clearly hesitated to openly compete within the city. Having clashed with several nascent soul elders from the coalition in the past, Han Li had no intention of approaching them. He shook his head and turned toward another shop. But before he could take a single step closer, several cultivators emerged from one of the 6 united palace pavilions. The moment Han Li saw the person leading them, his expression shifted ever so slightly. At the front walked an elderly man in yellow robes, appearing to be over 50. Beside him was a Taoist priest, clad in crane-patterned robes, a young man who looked barely past 20. Both were early nascent soul cultivators. Behind them followed 4 core formation cultivators, along with a middle-aged manager dressed in 6 united palace attire, his face full of eager deference. That was hardly surprising. Two nascent soul cultivators visiting a single shop was no small matter. But what caused Han Li's expression to change was not the old man. It was the young Taoist priest. Though he appeared youthful, there was no mistaking him. He was the very same Taoist master Swift Crane, the man who had hunted Han Li years ago and nearly taken his life. Only now, he had returned, resurrected. The fact that his appearance remained largely unchanged did not surprise Han Li. The cultivation world was filled with secret arts capable of altering one's appearance at will. Those who seized new bodies often subconsciously reverted to their original form to erase the evidence of possession. After all, while possession was not forbidden among high-level cultivators, it still carried a certain stigma. The fact that Taoist Master Swift Crane had regained his original appearance, yet appeared much younger than before, made one thing clear: he had only recently used such a technique. Altering one's face was simple, but altering the weight of years was another matter entirely. Han Li's expression settled instantly, returning to calm indifference as though nothing had happened. Without hesitation, he strode toward the pavilions. Taoist Master Swift Crane and the yellow-robed elder merely cast him a passing glance. Though they noted his relatively advanced cultivation, they paid him no further mind. Leading the four core formation cultivators toward the heart of the city, Han Li continued forward as well, never once turning his head, appearing no different from a passerby minding his own affairs. Yet at that very moment, the lips of Taoist Master Swift Crane and the yellow-robed man moved faintly. No sound emerged, a clear sign they were conversing through voice transmission. With his back still turned to them, Han Li's steps faltered ever so slightly, but only for an instant. He soon resumed his pace, drifting farther and farther away until their figures vanished behind him. After rounding a final corner, he entered an elegant, well-appointed pavilion. 2 hours later, Han Li emerged from the shop, accompanied by a cultivator who appeared to be its manager. He did not leave immediately. Instead, he stepped into another nearby store, then another, and another. By the time Han Li exited the fifth shop, he had exchanged all the excess treasures and materials he carried for over 100 high-grade spirit stones, a result that left him thoroughly satisfied. Yet just as he turned to leave, something caught his attention. Several unfamiliar core formation cultivators had appeared nearby. On the surface, they seemed to be browsing casually, but the fleeting glints in their eyes betrayed something far less innocent. Han Li let out a cold chuckle. Without hesitation, he abandoned his original plan. Turning on his heel, he strolled down the street, exited the marketplace, and walked out of the stone city altogether. The cultivators trailed behind him, each cloaked in concealment techniques. But the moment they passed through the city gates, they stopped. All of them turned to look at one another, confusion spreading across their faces. Han Li, who had been firmly within their spiritual senses just moments ago, had vanished. Completely. There was not even the faintest trace of his presence. Panic rippled through the group. Some of them had been sent by the shops Han Li had visited. Others had simply noticed the pattern, his repeated transactions. The respectful farewells from each manager, clear signs of significant wealth-changing hands. Though Han Li posed as a late core formation cultivator, the lure of such profit had emboldened them. Many had already resolved to join forces, but now they could only search the area in bewilderment. No matter how hard they tried, Han Li remained nowhere to be found. In the end, they could only return to the stone city, their hearts heavy with frustration and disappointment. Not long after they had all departed, a flicker of azure light shimmered in the air above the very spot where Han Li had disappeared. A vague humanoid outline emerged. Spiritual light rippled, and Han Li reappeared, restored to his original form. He cast a glance toward the stone city, a faint sneer tugging at his lips. If not for his desire to avoid drawing the attention of the nascent soul cultivators within, those pursuers would never have made it back alive. They were fortunate they had failed to pierce through his concealment. Otherwise, he would have eradicated them without the slightest effort. After surveying his surroundings from the sky, Han Li chose a direction and transformed into a streak of azure light. vanishing into the distance. A short while later, the streak descended into a quiet mountain pass. The place was serene, almost untouched, lush with vibrant flora and fauna, and shrouded in thick, lingering mist that clung stubbornly to the land. Hanli swept his gaze across the surroundings and gave a faint nod. With a flick of his wrist, a bundle of formation flags in various colors appeared in his hand. Over a dozen streaks of light shot outward, disappearing into the mist. Moments later, a layer of white fog surged up from the ground, merging seamlessly with the natural mist until the two became indistinguishable. Hanli vanished within it. Once the concealment formation was complete, he tapped a spirit beast pouch at his waist. A deafening buzz erupted. Tens of thousands of gold-devouring beetles poured forth, forming a dense golden cloud that hovered before him. Hanli sat cross-legged, his voice murmuring an incantation. Azure light flared across his body. A thunderous boom followed. The swarm scattered, transforming into countless golden streaks that shot off in all directions like a storm of radiant petals. At that very instant, Hanli's eyes snapped open. They gleamed with dazzling brilliance, then dimmed into unfathomable depths. This was the secret technique he had once used in Devilfall Valley, a method he had developed himself using the greater development technique, allowing him to split his spiritual sense into over 1,000 strands. Each strand could be embedded into a gold-devouring beetle. In that moment, it was as though he had gained 1,000 new sets of eyes and ears. Though it resembled the earlier method he used to implant a sliver of consciousness into a beetle, the two techniques were fundamentally different. This one required him to divide his spiritual sense all at once, dispersing it into countless threads and borrowing the senses of the beetles to extend his perception. It demanded constant control through his soul, and the insects could not stray beyond a certain range. The other method, however, involved placing a fragment of his soul into a single creature, allowing it to act independently according to preordained instructions. It could even attack on its own, almost like a rudimentary avatar, as long as time permitted. Distance posed no limitation. Compared to the latter, this technique was far less versatile, useful only when his spiritual sense alone proved insufficient. But the former, that was a rare and formidable art, one few even among late nascent soul cultivators could master. The two could not be compared. As the swarm dispersed, some beetles burrowed into the earth while others vanished into the sky. Within moments, not a single one remained in sight. At the heart of the formation, Hanli sat motionless, eyes closed, his expression cold and unreadable. Time flowed on. The sun dipped below the horizon. Night fell. Darkness swallowed Green Spirit Island. Yet the stone city remained ablaze with light. Moonlight stone, saturated with spiritual energy, illuminated its streets as brightly as day. Beyond its walls, however, the world was cast into deep shadow. The sea winds howled ceaselessly, like the wails of unseen demons lurking in the dark. Though cultivators could enhance their vision with magic, night still limited their sight compared to daylight. And in the scattered star seas, that limitation could be fatal. The outer seas teemed with demon beasts, many skilled in concealment. Whether traveling across the waters or resting upon an island, cultivators risked ambush at any moment. Few maintained their spiritual sense at full alert constantly. As a result, more cultivators perished each year to unseen attacks than in organized hunts. Thus, unless pressed by urgency or bolstered by confidence in their strength, most cultivators grew cautious after nightfall. Gathering places activated their protective formations. Those who remained ashore retreated within. Within the mountain-ringed stone city, 8 towering structures lit up simultaneously. A vast blue barrier unfolded, enveloping the entire city, warding against any demon beasts that might attempt to slip inside. Yet in the depths of night, several figures wearing conical bamboo hats approached one of the city gates in silence. The guards, led by a core formation cultivator and supported by several at the foundation establishment stage, stood. Watch. The leading figure lifted their hat slightly. The guards' expressions shifted immediately. Without hesitation, they opened a narrow gap in the city's protective barrier, allowing the group to pass. The moment they stepped beyond the city walls, they shot into the night as streaks of light vanishing in an instant. They traveled swiftly without a word, but after covering over 50 kilometers, one of them suddenly let out a startled sound, halting mid-air. A thin white thread shot from his hand, slicing into the darkness behind them. The others stopped as well, turning sharply. A sizzling sound split the air. Far in the distance, a burst of piercing golden light flared. The thread had struck something. With a strange, shrill screech, a fist-sized orb of golden light plummeted toward the earth. "What was that?" one of them exclaimed. The attacker flicked his wrist. The thread snapped back, spiraling through the air before condensing into a slender, snow-white needle that landed in his palm. Only then did he speak. "I'm not certain. It seemed to be a spirit insect, but whether wild or controlled, I cannot say. Its shell is unusually tough. Even my white sorrow needle failed to pierce it. Retrieve it. I want to see exactly what it is." Two cultivators immediately acknowledged the command and dove toward the darkened ground below. 10 minutes later, they returned, expressions grim. "Sect Master, it didn't die. We couldn't find its body. It didn't die." The man's voice sharpened. "Do you take my white sorrow needle for a toy? Are you telling me it couldn't even kill a mere insect?" "Brother Bai, it truly seemed to have survived. I found nothing," either the other added solemnly. "Impossible. Let me see for myself." Alarm flickered across his face. He immediately released his spiritual sense, sweeping the area meticulously. Moments passed. His expression grew strained. There was nothing. Not the slightest trace. Shock rippled through him. His lips trembled as he transmitted something urgently. At once the other two raised their hands. One summoned a small green hammer. The other unleashed a web of fine white threads, forming a protective barrier around them. "Who's there?" The man barked, his voice ringing through the night. "Stop skulking in the shadows. Show yourself." At the same time, his gaze swept the darkness, a powerful aura erupting from his body like a storm on the verge of breaking. The surroundings fell utterly silent. No figure emerged from the darkness. No presence revealed itself. It was as if no one had ever been there at all. The cultivator who had spoken earlier grew visibly incensed. A cold snort escaped his lips as he formed a hand seal, clearly preparing to unleash a devastating attack to force their hidden pursuer into the open. But at that very moment, a faint buzzing arose. It came from all directions at once, low at first, then rapidly intensifying. The sound swelled like an approaching storm. The cultivators' hearts jolted violently. Their eyes widened as they swept their gazes across the darkness. Then, points of golden light began to flicker into existence. 1, then 10, then hundreds. Each glimmer concealed a golden beetle within. More and more appeared until the night itself seemed studded with countless glittering stars. They had been surrounded. A ripple of unease swept through the group. Even the two nascent soul cultivators at the front were visibly shaken. The man who had attacked earlier knew all too well how troublesome these insects were. Facing such numbers, this would not be easily resolved. His expression darkened instantly. His spiritual sense surged outward again and again, desperately searching for the one controlling these creatures. But it was futile. Their opponent remained perfectly concealed. Not even the faintest trace could be found. A chill crept into his heart. This could only mean one of two things. Either their enemy possessed extraordinary concealment techniques, or their cultivation far surpassed his own. Neither possibility boded well. "If you intend to trap us with your insects, then at least state your purpose." The cultivator wielding the jade hammer shouted, his voice ringing through the night. Brilliant green light began to pulse from the treasure in his hand. "You hide in the shadows and refuse to show yourself. Are you truly nothing more than a coward? Haha, you'll meet me soon enough." A cold male voice drifted through the darkness, echoing from all directions. "Fellow Taoist Swift Crane, I've come especially for you. How could I not show myself? Do you remember me? Just an insignificant cultivator. surnamed Han. The voice sounded distant, very distant. You, who are you? When have I ever offended you? One of the figures stirred violently at those words. He tore off his bamboo hat, revealing a youthful face filled with shock and confusion. It was Taoist Master Swift Crane. Beside him, the yellow-robed cultivator also removed his hat, his expression turning grave as his gaze swept the darkness like a blade. Behind them stood their disciples, core formation cultivators, now tense and silent. Their secretive departure from Green Spirit Island, under cover of night, suddenly felt far less secure. A burst of laughter erupted from the darkness, wild, unrestrained, before cutting off abruptly. No answer followed, only silence. The tension thickened. Fellow Taoist Swift Crane, is this one of your enemies? The yellow-robed man asked, brows furrowed deeply. The words of their unseen assailant made it clear. This confrontation was directed at Swift Crane. I don't know. Taoist Master Swift Crane replied, his expression composed, but his eyes clouded with uncertainty. He raised his horsetail whisk, slightly positioning it before him. I have no recollection of an enemy named Han. The yellow-robed man hesitated, unease flickering across his face. Regardless, his intentions are clearly hostile. You should remain cautious. I'm well aware. Swift Crane's voice was calm yet troubled. But how could I forget an enemy of this caliber? Han. He sank into thought. Then, a sharp tearing sound split the night. A streak of azure light shot forth from the distance, slicing through the swarm of beetles and arriving in the midst of them in the blink of an eye. The light faded. A young man in azure robes stood revealed, his gaze locked onto Taoist Master Swift Crane, a cold chuckle escaping his lips. So, I was right to wait. You truly came to Green Spirit Island. His tone was casual, almost lazy. Now then, will you hand over your spirit stones? Or shall I take them myself? He stood alone, yet utterly unafraid, before two nascent soul cultivators. The two elders immediately swept their spiritual sense toward him, and their expressions changed. They could not discern his cultivation, but the faint pressure emanating from him was unmistakable. He was stronger, far stronger. At the very least, a mid-nascent soul cultivator. And worse, he knew their secret. Fellow Taoist, the yellow-robed man said quickly, forcing a polite smile, I am Huang Kun of Fire Dragon Island. I'm afraid there must be some misunderstanding regarding these so-called high-grade spirit stones. Misunderstanding. Han Li let out a soft laugh, his eyes cold. I heard your voice transmissions earlier. Was that a misunderstanding too? His smile sharpened. You can only blame your misfortune for seeking out Swift Crane and running into me. He turned fully toward Taoist Master Swift Crane. A frost settled in his gaze. Swift Crane, do you remember me now? At that moment, recognition struck. Swift Crane's expression froze. You're Han Li. His voice trembled with disbelief. You've reached the nascent soul stage. It was as though he had seen a ghost. Brother Swift Crane, you know him. Huang Kun's voice darkened, a mixture of shock and anger rising within him. Han Li hovered calmly in the air, arms crossed, watching them with a faint mocking smile. Fellow Taoist Huang Swift Crane said grimly, he's the one who obtained the Heaven Void Cauldron all those years ago. Huang Kun's eyes widened in shock. That man, the one hunted by the Starfall Alliance. But he was only a core formation junior. How could he have reached mid-nascent soul already? Swift Crane's eyes gleamed faintly with greed. I don't know. But the Heaven Void Cauldron is the greatest secret treasure of the scattered star seas. Perhaps it contains some unimaginable elixir capable of drastically increasing cultivation. If that's true. Huang Kun's voice turned heavy as he transmitted secretly, then we're in serious trouble. His strength is already overwhelming, and with the cauldron, even together we may not be his match. I know, Swift Crane replied, his lips twitching slightly, yet confidence crept into his eyes. But even so, how could he stop us if we choose to flee? Huang Kun paused, then burst into laughter. You're right. Their decision was made. The disciples behind them were already abandoned. Huff, finish talking. Han Li's voice cut through the air laced with cold amusement. If so, then it's time I send you on your way. His gaze sharpened. Don't even think about running. Wang Kun's expression changed abruptly. Damn it, we forgot he can hear our transmissions. Swift Crane's face darkened. And at that exact moment, thunder roared. A deafening crack split the sky as a pair of shimmering wings materialized behind Han Li. His thunderstorm wings. Lightning surged. His figure vanished. Be careful, Swift Crane shouted instantly. He has a lightning movement technique. Green light erupted from his jade hammer, forming a protective barrier around him. At the same time, he summoned a crimson shield, which expanded into a second layer of defense. Beside him, Huang Kun formed a hand seal. The white threads surrounding him surged together, weaving into a dense, impenetrable net. In an instant, both were fully on guard. Then, a flash of silver light. Han Li reappeared just over 100 feet away. He glanced at their defenses and sneered. Without summoning a single treasure, he raised both arms. Purple flames erupted across his body. His figure blurred and transformed into a blazing inferno, hurtling straight toward Huang Kun like a falling star. Huang Kun's heart lurched at the sheer ferocity of the attack. But there was no time to hesitate. With a roar, he directed the white threads forward. They shot toward the fireball in a dense barrage, aiming to pierce and shred it into countless fragments. At the same time, a savage gleam flashed in Swift Crane's eyes. He pointed sharply at his jade hammer. It exploded with light. A torrent of green radiance surged outward, rumbling like thunder as it crashed toward Han Li. And yet, Han Li did not evade, not even slightly. He plunged directly into the storm of threads. The mocking smile on his lips vanished within the blazing violet flames.